Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, here for the Phono Stage Shootout, which I know a lot of you have been looking for. Don't have a whole lot of different versions to put in this one. We'll talk about a little cheap solid state one that my friend has. I'll try to get the model from him to put in the description, but don't have it here in front of us to have in the shootout. So we've got the Cern tubes, which is a hand-built from over in Eastern Europe. We've got the Little Bear nobsound that we were just doing this little series on upgrading. And then we have my EAR834 clone that I built from the circuit board that you can get on eBay from ZeroZone with all hand-selected components with upgraded parts too. In my own chassis with a Hammond transformer and stuff. So this is a less of a China product, even though the board comes from there. It's pretty much a hand-built thing with hand-selected parts, which I'm going to rate as our 10 on our scale of 1 to 10, just for ratings purposes. And before we get into rating these guys, I want to show you some final upgrades that I did to the Little Bear, thanks to some comments for some viewers, and then when I was reassembling it, remembering a problem I had when I built this one for the first time that I corrected when I assembled this one. So let's look at the upgrades to this. Okay, so we went back in after reading some of the comments that the viewers sent in. One of them was a good one. These little ceramic caps that are part of the RIAA network. I hate these little ceramic caps. So we came in and put silver mica caps in their place. And I have some 110 caps so I can replace the 100 and the 10 PF that they had paralleled here with a single 110 cap. 330 here, 330 here, and another 110 here. And the little Cornell doublers that you can get in Mauser work good. These were some that I had left over from another project that I used, but they're also silver mica, and they're just nicer sounding caps. So we soldered those in, and then I'm going to show you one more thing I did when I reassembled it this time that I forgot to do the first time. So the other thing I wanted to show you that I neglected to do when I put this thing together the first time, you want to make sure these power leads that are coming from the transformer, that you twist them up like this. When I put this together the last time, I just had them straight, and I believe that's the way they come from the factory. Anytime you have AC wires, you want to make sure that you twist them like this, as that helps cancel any hum that they may be introducing inside the box. And so you can see you twisted this one up too. I made that mistake on one of my EAR834 builds, and I didn't twist the wires up, and it had a pretty nasty hum in it. And when I came back and twisted these AC leads up, it went away. And then you also want to twist up this lead that's coming from the power switch the same way to help cancel out any AC hum that they might be generating inside the case. So let me get this thing thrown back together and then let it burn in for another couple of hours, and we will do our comparison between this and the EAR834 clone. So you can see changing out those little ceramic caps for the silver mica caps was not a big deal and well worth doing, and routing the power leads correctly also will help reduce hum. So let's jump into ABC listening to these things and see what my thoughts are. Like I said in the last video, I really wanted to like this one. I love 6S and 7 tubes. It's got a tube rectifier. It's got a really pretty kind of handmade, obviously a handmade chassis with this copper that they, think they've put some clear finish on to keep it from corroding, and it just is a really nice looking handmade preamp, and I would love to be able to support the cottage industry of someone making these things probably in their basement like I make my stuff. But guys, it just doesn't sound good. It's somehow they've compressed the EQ to just the center frequencies have a lot of focus, and the high end and the low end both roll off, and it just ends up sounding kind of muddy. It was by far the worst sounding of the ones that we tested, including the little cheap solid state one from Amazon. It actually sounds better to me than this one did. And I'm driving a tube amp, so it can't be that it's, having to drive a really hard load. Like maybe you could say if you had a real low impedance solid state amp that it was struggling with that. That's not the problem. I think they just missed the EQ. And it's wired point to point. You could probably go in here and fix this. But at this point, given these other options that are simpler and easier and cheaper, I just don't see any point in trying to fix this one. So I'm just going to send it back to the viewer who sent it to me, and I think he said he's just going to try to sell it on eBay or something and try to recoup some of his money. So can't recommend this one, guys. The other thing that's kind of weird is they've got the input jacks up here. They've got the output jacks here. It's got a switch here that I couldn't hear any difference flipped either way. I'm not even sure what it's supposed to be doing. And then the really weird thing to me is they put the phono ground here on the back. So you've got like the input jacks up here in the front, and then you get the ground in the back, which to me doesn't make any sense. It should be up here in the front next to one of these jacks. That just makes sense. So this guy here, I'm going to give it about a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 on being a usable phono stage. And most built-in phono stages in an integrated amplifier are going to sound better than this one does. So then the next one we're going to jump to is the EAR 834 clone. Like I said, going to give it a 10 on the scale of 1 to 10 to give us some kind of way of rating this. This is still the best sounding phono preamp that I've heard. I've compared it to some $1,000 solid state discrete component phono stages, and this still has more life to it, I feel like, than those two. It's got a nice 3D sound. The sound stage, or the depth of the sound, is just really nice. I mean, it really brings out the performance where it sounds like you're in the room. Again, it's just a really great phono preamp. I'm fixing to do another video series on building, I guess, kind of the next gen of this. I've been experimenting with these, and the one I did a video series on, I did the power supply board separate with a divider between the two sections. Honestly, it didn't make any difference. It's not worth the trouble that takes to do. It's fine, and it's equally quiet just leaving the board soldered together. What I'm going to try on the next one is I got a different power transformer that's going to go inside the chassis instead of sitting on top of it, and there's plenty of room here in the back. I'm not sure if that's going to introduce some noise into it or not. I hope not. Don't think it's really going to. The other thing is I'm speccing out some slightly shorter power supply capacitors that are a little bigger in diameter so I can move the board further up towards the top, and I'm going to have the tubes sticking out about this far. Still going to be recessed and the sockets are going to be down inside, but have it sticking out a little more so it's easier to get the tubes out. These are really hard to swap out. You almost have to like put some masking tape around it to give you something to grab a hold of, because there's just not enough of the tubes sticking out. And I did that to try to shield the tubes from the power transformer and from any external noise, but since I'm going to be putting the power transformer inside, so I do want the tubes on this one to stick out a little bit. And you'll be seeing that build soon. and I'll show you like the hand selection process and why you don't want to buy one of these straight from China, already pre-built. So next is the little bear, and I want to kind of go over what all the upgrades did on it and maybe a way to save some money and still get most of the way there. I would say this was a 5 out of the box. This was probably a 7.5. The China 6N2 tubes were pretty noisy. And to me, they just didn't really have a rich sound to them. I mean, they weren't bad. I mean, it was, like I said, it's a big step up from this. But it just, even if you just throw out the noise, they just didn't have a really rich sound. So the next thing we did was we flipped the switches over to 12AX7, put a set of new production Muller 12AX7s in it. And that definitely improved the richness of the sound. I mean, it was a big step up. I would say now we're at an 8. You have to use the Chinese rectifier. Don't be tempted to try to use the US spec one. The pinout's different. And given it's a PC board, you really can't. I mean, unless you want to mess around with adapters, and there's really no point. Just use the little China rectifier tube that comes with it. That's fine. There's not a lot of current running through this thing, and that tube's bound to last quite a while. So, again, with 12AX7s, sounded better. Also tried a set of Gold Lion 12AX7s, and it was very similar to what the Muller's sounded like, and these are all new production tubes. So next, put in a set of Electro-Harmonix EH7025 tubes. They're slightly lower gain, but they're designed to be super low noise, and that proved to be the case. When I put those tubes in, the noise floor dropped a ton. I mean, it was like really night and day difference. They are so much quieter than 12AX7 tubes. In a preamp, especially when you're dealing with a low signal like a phono is, you really need quiet tubes. 7025 tubes deliver. Now, RCA made some, Motorola made some, new old stock. Both of those sound good. The RCAs are a little less bright, a little mellower. The Motorola's just sound really good, but they're not that far off from the new production. So I wouldn't waste a ton of money going from, Electro-Harmonix new production to new old stock. It's going to be a really minor difference. So the quieter tubes definitely moved it up a little bit. It's had the same richness that the 12AX7s did without the noise. So then you saw the video series I did, 2 videos on replacing the coupling caps and then matching the impedance of the input to what modern moving magnet cartridges want to see, which is 47K ohms, and then put some Mundorf aluminum oil caps. We reduced the capacitance of the middle between the second and third tube, and then we increased the one on the output. And that did exactly what I thought it was going to do. It gave some spunkiness to the top end, but it also gave the bottom end some much needed punch that it was missing from the factory. And so I think the main improvement was going with that one UF cap on the output. That 0.47 is just not big enough to drive the impedance of most amps that you're going to be driving this thing with. So the last thing you saw earlier in this video, viewer comment was like, hey, if those are little ceramic caps in the feedback circuit, why don't you upgrade those to silver mica or something like that? And given that I put silver mica in these, and I've never screwed around with those ceramic caps because I do not like ceramic caps in the signal path, took the amp back apart, put some silver mica caps in there that are high precision, and then also twisted up the power leads to help reduce any hum that might be left. Does seem a little quieter, so I think that was a bonus, but the silver mica caps made a huge improvement. And I would say now with the Mundorf caps, or at least increasing the size of that output cap and decreasing the size of that middle cap, and then putting some silver mica precision caps in the feedback circuit, this preamp is about a 9, which is saying a lot. I mean, it sounds really spunky. It's got some nice sparkle on the top end. It's got a pretty good 3D-ness to it, the holographic or whatever you want to call it. And it's just got a really rich sound between these tubes and those silver mica caps. I mean, I can't understate the difference that made. So, if I was going to try to upgrade this on a budget, maybe try upgrading those caps with the correct sizes using something a little less expensive. I mean, you could probably get some Soldering caps, or maybe even, the lower end of the Mundorf caps, and get, probably 90% of what I got with the aluminum oil caps, because it was actually the size of the caps that gave it the sonic improvement. And then absolutely replace those little cheap ceramic caps they have in the feedback circuit. Now, I'm not sure if it's just that those aren't good quality, or that maybe they're like 20% spec caps where, it says 100 PF on it and it could be anywhere from 80 to 120. These need to be precision caps, because this is the equalization that, undoes the RIAA equalization that we're trying to, put into the amplifier. And if that's not done correctly, it's not going to sound right. I also noticed that the preamp has a little more gain now that I put those silver mica caps in, which is telling me that maybe those ceramic caps were leaking a little bit, and it was dumping too much feedback into the first stage of the amplification. Not sure what was going on, but it was definitely an improvement. So anyway, this is still the winner. But I've never reviewed one that was pre-built. And there's a lot of components that are way off of what the spec is that are supplied with these boards. And I have a feeling that's what they solder in them, is those components. And so, one of these pre-built probably doesn't sound any better than this one does. And this little guy might get up to 10 if you went through and just stripped the board and went back through and hand selected all the values to make sure that all the resistors were spot on what the design spec were. Because my experience, if it's even close, they just throw it in the board and solder it in. So that could be what's keeping this from being what this one sounds like. If you're looking for an inexpensive phono preamp that you can do some, pretty easy mods to and get to a really high level of quality sound, you might want to look at one of these little bears. I like the way it's laid out. It does have a volume control. I would recommend running it wide open and control the volume with your amp if you can. Although, if you've got a power amp, you can use this as the volume control. To me, it sounded just a little cleaner when I ran this wide open and used the volume control on the amp. But it didn't sound bad using this if you need to. So that's not a huge, it's not like this got super flat sounding at half volume or anything. So, don't be afraid to use this volume control if you can. But if you're using it with an integrated amp, just crank this wide open and use it like that. So anyway, I think these things are pretty reasonably priced. Again, if you don't want to spend the money on those aluminum oil caps, you could probably, even if you just got the little Illinois little yellow jacket looking caps and get them in the right sizes, that'll probably give you most of the improvement. And again, those silver mica caps in the feedback loop made a huge improvement, as well as these 7025 low noise tubes. So anyway, either one of these I think most people would be super happy with, and they both sound way better than the phono stages that are integrated into most amplifiers that we're used to listening to. They really bring it alive. What this one brings to the table is just a little more 3D-ness. It's hard to explain. It's just, it makes the sound more real, which I know is kind of probably not measurable. In the future, I do want to try to figure out how to hook these up to the audio analyzer suite. It's probably not that hard. I just been so busy I haven't had time to investigate that and like really be able to show you guys like why this one's bad, why this one's good, etc. But for now, you're just going to have to take my word for it that this guy just misses the mark. This is pretty close. This is still the best. And one thing I want to add, while this little amp's pretty nice looking, it just looks kind of weird seeing these plastic, sockets that are soldered onto the PC board through here, and the tubes look like they're just kind of standing out here. I don't know, it just kind of looks cheap. So you might want to go to Yoda Electronics, I'll put the link below, and get some of these little tube rings. And honestly, you don't even really need to bolt these down to the amplifier, although it looks like there's a couple of holes drilled here that would probably fit in there, so you could screw them down. Look how much nicer that looks. And a set of these around these tubes, I think would really dress up this little amp. So that may be something you'd want to consider, just as kind of a, hey, I'm going to make mine, look a little nicer than they come. Just thought I'd throw that little tip in. So, hope you're enjoying this content. If you are, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thank you for your Patreon supporters. And thank you for you folks like the viewer who sent me these two Phono preamps to play with and upgrade and be able to supply content for you. We got some other cool projects coming in the future, so please subscribe if you enjoy this kind of stuff. And until then, have a nice day.